It's a new year here on Jacket Sports Weekly, and this year we look a lot clearer.
Yeah, we do, Hugh, and we're going to be talking about a ton today. We have volleyball, men's and women's soccer, men's and women's cross country, football, and later on, Caleb Yager will be sitting down with Fashawn Graham for an interview. I'm Riley Holsinger.
And I'm Hugh O'Neill, and it's time for Jacket Sports Weekly.
For the fifth time this season, the Jackets were handed a defeat, this time at the hands of Carnegie Mellon. It was a final score of 24-3 as the Tartans had a 21-point second-half output. The Jackets were able to keep the game tied 3 apiece at halftime, but obviously that lead didn't stay much long.
It was a game of back-and-forth field goals for the Jackets in the first half. After Mike Ryle's 32-yard field goal, CMU's Josh Lyons tied the game at 3 apiece with his 26-yard field goal, but missed his 33-yard field goal with 9 seconds left in the first half. Then a Carnegie Mellon fake punt on 4th and 2 led to a score, and head coach Chris Smithley thought his team would have been prepared, as they've seen fake punts in the past and prepared.
And we've watched it, and we've fixed it, and, it's just one of those things that you get in the heat of the moment and it happens, and we've got to continue to work to be better.
Junior running back Luca Buckledge, a 6-yard touchdown run was thanks to the successful fake punt. Head coach Rick Leichner trusted his punter to make the right play.
I just felt we could get it. Casey, our punter, is a very, very good athlete and runs exceptionally well, and I think he has good vision. I had a lot of trust in him that he would make the first down, which he did.
When Waynesburg got the ball back, the 17-yard pick six by senior safety Thomas Plutchko gave CMU a 17-3 lead. He was able to make this play thanks to the halftime adjustment.
Well, so they were hitting us with ends a lot, so we had tried to adjust to sort of stop having the corner to have to chase that inside and sort of giving them some help. So having our coaches basically prep that at halftime helped us out a lot.
Once with the lead, the Jackets saw CMU run the ball for a total of 275 yards. As they held the lead and took control of the game, Coach Leichner was happy with how his team finished the game.
And you kind of go with what your strength is at that point. We felt like we had a lot of strength on the offensive line, and defensively, we felt like we were getting some movement. So we felt we had a good chance to run the ball and get some first downs.
But according to Smithley, his team did well with second-half adjustments.
They were running power a little bit different than a lot of people running. I mean, they were cutting it all the way back across the formation, and we talked about it, and Coach V made some adjustments, and I feel like we got it handled in the second half. But those things are going to happen in football. You gotta make adjustments and keep moving forward.
For WCTV, I'm Antonio Palulo.
Thank you, Antonio, for coverage on the Waynesburg versus Carnegie Mellon game. But let's flip it over to our very own Adam Morganti, who had coverage of the Waynesburg University versus Grove City College football game. Adam, take it away.
Wesley Schools took the Waynesburg defense to school as he scored 5 rushing touchdowns to lead the Wolverines to a 42-24 victory over the Yellow Jackets.
It was perfect weather for football at John F. Wiley Stadium, and Wesley Schools was basically perfect for Grove City, rushing for a regular season school record 324 yards. Schools set the postseason rushing record last year in Grove City's victory against Mooresville State with 359 yards.
I think this O-line really did a great job opening up the hole. There's Cody, Gustin, and Cam Drake, and they're throughout the outside. So I think Waynesburg's defense really wanted to make sure we didn't throw on them.
Schools got his touchdown party started on Grove City's opening drive with a 1-yard touchdown run, which only took 2 minutes and 22 seconds. Waynesburg was able to drive into Grove City territory, but was stopped on 4th down. Schools would score his second of 5 touchdowns from 35 yards away to make it 14-0. Schools then plunges into the end zone from 6 yards, making it 21-0 in the second quarter. Mike Ryle got the Jackets on the board with a 23-yard field goal to make it 21-3 at halftime.
We didn't finish our drives with touchdowns, and we needed to do that, and we knew that coming into this game, it was possess the football.
Schools then gets his 4th rushing touchdown from 13 yards out to give Grove City a 28-3 lead. Mason Schrenker connects with Cole Booth for a 19-yard touchdown for Booth's first touchdown of the season. Jordan Taylor then runs for a 6-yard touchdown to cut Grove City's lead to 11, but that's the closest Waynesburg would get as Grove City holds on for a 42-24 victory.
Fought our butts off to get back in the mix, and it was all phases. It was offense, it was defense with creating some turnovers, and it was special teams playing a major role in creating some spark there for us with the kickoff.
With Waynesburg losing to Grove City, they now drop to 1-6 overall and 1-5 in PAC play. Their next game will be right here at John F. Wiley Stadium next Saturday as they take on the St. Vincent Bearcats at 1:30. And now Waynesburg has lost to Grove City 3 consecutive times. For WCTV Sports, I'm Adam Morganti.
We're back here on Jacket Sports Weekly, and now it's time for the men's and women's soccer team. The men's team, starting off, they lost 2 matches, and then they tied over fall break. They first lost to Bethany 1-2, then lost to W&J 4-2, and then tied with Westminster 2-2. So Hugh, what was your first thoughts into the matchups they had?
I mean, these games have been very close really throughout the whole season, and it's very unfortunate that this team is so low in the PAC, an 0-2-3 record, not winning a game in the PAC, but 3 ties. And how the points work in the PAC is that you get 1 point per tie, but 3 points per win. So that difference between the Bethany game and double overtime and that tie with Westminster, if Waynesburg can get a goal in overtime or double overtime, you're looking at moving up multiple spots in the PAC. So it's just unfortunate for that, and these games have been so close, but we've started to see some kind of senior leadership, and the upperclassmen such as Nate Biondi, Dante Ohm, Kyle Diener, and Nate Coomer, they've been coming on and scoring pretty well, but it's just not the amount of production that the team needs in order to get a victory.
Yeah, definitely. I could see where you're coming from with that too, and I think this defense needs to step up and help Adam Dolan out a little bit because it's hard being a goalie, especially in soccer, but this team has so many talented pieces that it's just kind of disappointing to see that they're not putting up results that we'd like to see. As you said, sitting at 3-8-3, and then in the PAC 0-2-3. But flipping over to the women's soccer side, it hasn't been much better either. The women's team is sitting at 2 wins, 10 losses, and 2 ties. And then in the PAC, no wins, 3 losses, and 2 ties. Hugh, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, they're obviously worse off than the men. Also, you mentioned with the ties, so it's real close right there in last place in the PAC. That's obviously not good. And we have seen some things, just like Bethany. Waynesburg, the men and women both lost to Bethany in double overtime, the women losing 3-2, and then tied W&J. Now, that is a tie, but that is a huge, not win, obviously, but that's huge for the Waynesburg University Yellow Jacket women's soccer team, just because W&J is one of the more premier teams in the PAC, whether any sport really. So that was really good for them to tie a huge underdog going into that game to get that tie, the goal from Joe Moyer, and then the Westminster just the loss by 1. So in the past week, Waynesburg has only lost by 2 goals in combined 3 games. So it's just that little bit that Autumn Blair is doing a great job in the net, and we'll get to her later in our top 5, but it's just small things that Waynesburg's slowly improving.
Yeah, definitely it has. As Autumn Blair has really stepped up because before the season, my biggest question mark with this Waynesburg University women's soccer team was the goalkeeping. How were they going to replace Courtney Seifert, who was amazing in net for them last year? But Blair has been doing an awesome job so far, and it showed because she's been able to keep this team in the games. And we're going to move over to the women's volleyball team for Waynesburg. A little bit of a disappointing stretch for them at 3-18 overall, but they did come up with a big win on Saturday, Hugh.
They did come up with a big win there, but however, that really doesn't do much as Penn State Shenango is not in the PAC. Waynesburg was able to win 3-0. And looking at I'm going to list all the scores. And so Waynesburg lost to Grove City 3-1, to St. Vincent 3-0, Bethany, Geneva, and Westminster all 3-0, and then able to get that win against Penn State Shenango. Waynesburg has only won 2 sets in 32 PAC sets. So when you look at that, I mean, obviously there's not much good that you can come out of that. I mean, I was trying to look to find some good things and how Waynesburg has won some sets, but when you only win 2 sets out of 32 in PAC play, that's just really not going to cut it. Now, Waynesburg has done all right. They have lost these sets, but in this next game I'm going to preview, as they play Teal on this coming week, and then on Thursday it is Chatham, and that is the breast cancer awareness match of the year, and that is on Thursday. The last time Waynesburg went against Chatham, they had lost 3-0. However, they lost the sets 25-21, 25-13, and 25-23. So 2 of those sets were very close, and that's something that we've seen. Waynesburg comes usually close in the first set. They'll lose within around 5, and then the second set they'll just blow up, and then the third set it'll be a little closer. But that's just something that's tough. So Waynesburg has Chatham, who is second to last in the PAC. Waynesburg, obviously, without a PAC win, is last in the PAC. So if Waynesburg wants to get one PAC win, it's most likely going to come on Thursday.
Yeah, definitely, Hugh, as this team, they have definitely got off to a slow start, and I know head coach Haley Kirby has not really liked what she has seen from her team here. But when we come back on Jacket Sports League Weekly, we'll have football with an analyst joining us. Stay tuned.
Traditional light bulbs actually generate 9 times more heat than light. Switch to Energy Star light bulbs, and you'll realize just how much cash you are really burning through. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov.
We're back here on JSW with Jacob Nicholas, our football analyst. Now, Jacob, Wesley Schools had 324 yards and 5 touchdowns this past week against Waynesburg. What's Waynesburg going to have to do for this upcoming week to really stop the running game?
Well, I think what they've got to do is try to force St. Vincent into the passing game, because their passing defense is one of the best passing defenses in the country, under 100 yards allowed per game in the passing defense. But their rushing defense has just been a problem all season, allowing just way too many yards rushing every game to their opponents. And that's just due to a lack of experience up front. Their front 4 are mostly freshmen, and it's just been a battle that they've had to endure all season with every opponent that they've faced.
Now, St. Vincent's quarterback, Coda, he is a dual-threat quarterback, so how do you think Waynesburg should plan for that?
Look to go into a contained sort of defense. Look to make sure he doesn't scramble outside the pocket, because as we said, rush defense is their problem. Force him to throw the football. He's only 23 of 50 on the season when he passes the ball, so less than 50% completion percentage. So if they can force him to pass, they had multiple interceptions in the game this past weekend against Grove City. So if they can force him to get the ball in the air, look to have Vashon Graham or Ty Smith, some of those guys, the linebackers, safeties, defensive backs, make plays in the air. That's where I see that they can have a better chance of winning.
Now, Waynesburg has St. Vincent this upcoming week. Both teams' only victory coming against Teal. Now, what do you see? Do you think Waynesburg can pick up its second win of the season?
I think if Waynesburg is going to pick up a second win this season, this is the game that they have to do it in. After this game, they have Washington and Jefferson and Case Western left on their schedule. And Case Western, number 19 team in the country, D3. Washington and Jefferson, historically great program. So if they're going to pick up a second win, it's going to have to be against St. Vincent this coming weekend. St. Vincent beat Teal 41-18. Waynesburg beat Teal 14-13, so a little bit different margin there for both teams, but this is the team that Waynesburg has to look to get a win if they want to build any momentum at all going into the last couple weeks of the season.
Do you think Coach Smithley is going to continue with that 3-headed rushing attack of Justin Flack, Chad Walker, and Jordan Taylor? We saw it in the Grove City game, how it worked a good bit for this team. Do you think he'll continue to use it?
I don't see why not. I mean, I think he's had a decent bit of success with that. I think that he's got a lot of production out of Justin Flack, a freshman running back this season who's produced a lot for the team. I think upcoming against St. Vincent, though, they need to look to the passing attack a little bit more. Schrenker needs to prove himself a little bit. He's filling into that starting role now. He's firmly the starting quarterback for Waynesburg, and that pass defense for St. Vincent has been their weakness this season. So I think A little bit more focus on the passing game for Waynesburg this coming weekend against St. Vincent is what will be the calling card for their offense rather than the three-headed rushing attack.
Thanks, Jacob. Really appreciate everything you've done, especially for this past week here on JSW. When we return, we'll have cross country with Corey Fisher here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
We're back here on Jacket Sports Weekly for the men's and women's cross country segment, and joining us is Corey Fisher. Corey, the women's and the men's team were at the Oberlin Interregional Rumble, but let's go over the women's team first. What were some of the results and some of your thoughts coming out of the meet?
Yeah, well, first thing to note is that the Oberlin Interregional Rumble pulls from a lot of different schools from all three divisions, so it's a little bit tougher competition. But the ladies placed 16th out of 32 teams there, and Aubrey Wingard, again, was the headline for Waynesburg. She placed 21st out of 286 runners, which is a pretty big accomplishment, especially at such a high-class level race. Also, some new faces in the scoring seven for Waynesburg this week, which is good to see because we get to continually see that depth, which is really growing on that competition that's probably within that locker room. Gianna Pugliano placed this week. She's the junior who was pretty prevalent on the scoring sheet last year. She placed 149th. And then a freshman, Madeline Kerhoff, placed 146th out of the 286 runners. So it's good to see a freshman also, especially when you're on such a competitive team with such good runners. And as for the men, I think this is a little more of a storyline because the women, we always expect the greatness. But for the men, I think they're finding an identity this year, which is what I'm really focused on the most. Because last year we saw that sophomore-heavy class, but they were very inconsistent, and that's kind of what worried me both with the fall and the spring semester. This year in the fall, for all three of the races they've had so far, they've placed in the top half of the finishing standings, which is pretty good for them. And now that they're junior-heavy class, they're a little bit older, and we talked about that last week, where they can just grow and continue to grow. And then they lay the foundation for Jack Coakley, who's really their best runner right now. He's a freshman. He ran 134th out of the 346 runner field.
So Waynesburg has a week off, and then it's PAX in early November. What do you see happening during PAX?
I think they'll do really well this year because, like I just said about this Oberlin Interregional Rumble, these teams are going to really matchups with colleges from all around the country and all different regions, really. And now they're going within their own conference, which the women have dominated for the past decade, really. And so I think they'll do nothing short but dominate this year, especially with Aubrey Wingard, who's nothing short of spectacular so far. And I think the men are really going to step up this year and surprise some people, both in the fall and the spring, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Do you think Jack Coakley provides the men's team with what Aubrey Wingart provides for the women's team?
I think it's a little bit different situation only because Coakley's a freshman, which I think actually helps the men because this goes back to the identity thing. Last year we didn't really see what their identity was because of how inconsistent they were, but now they're a junior-heavy class who are very good and they're very consistent right in the middle with that 2 to 6 scoring. So now when you have Jack Coakley at the freshman, he can hold that up at that top scorer position, which also makes those juniors strive to even be more great because they want to try to show out for the freshmen.
Thank you, Corey. And when we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly, Tanner Saprosky will have men's and women's soccer. Stay tuned.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play or even what you wear. You just need to be there. Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you.
It's time for some in-depth soccer analysis with Tanner Saprosky. Now, looking at the men and the women, let's talk about the playoff picture here so far.
Well, I'll start with the men. The men currently are in 7th out of 9 teams with a record of 0-2-3. And those 3 ties have been pretty close games they could have won. Their last game they tied the first place team, Westminster, 2-2 in double overtime, which that was a huge game for Waynesburg because obviously Westminster's in first. And that keeps Waynesburg's hopes alive for the playoffs because with only 3 games left, it's going to be tough, but Waynesburg's next 2 games, they play St. Vincent and Teal, who are 8th and 9th in the standings. So those are 2 games that Waynesburg should be able to win, and that would give them, set their record to 2-2-3, which potentially could set them up around 5th or 6th place, and then depending on the teams in 4th and 5th, which Geneva's 3-1, Bethany's 2-2. So if if Waynesburg has to win out first and foremost, but if Geneva, Bethany, and Chatham's 0-3-2, but they're in 6, so they're still ahead. But if Waynesburg wins out and those teams ahead of them lose a game or two, Waynesburg, the men's side, has a good chance of making it in. But for the women's, they're dead last at 0-3-2. They still have a chance, however, with the teams ahead of them. The 4 teams ahead of them only have 1 win. So Waynesburg, the women do have potential to make the playoffs, but it's going to be a lot more difficult than the men's.
So why do you think the women's and the men's team are struggling right now?
The women's, I think it's more simple because they have talent on the team, but their lack of goal scoring kind of keeps them out of games because their goalie right now, you mentioned it earlier in the show, that's a freshman, Autumn Blair. She has an 81% save percentage, but a 1-6-1 win-loss and tie record, which is that's not what you want out of a goalie that has 10 saves a game. So Waynesburg needs the women, they need to move the ball more through the midfield and get more scoring chances. And for the men, I think they just need to grind out the games that come down late in the second half because they have close games, but they end up losing them, which ultimately hurts them in the standings.
Well, thank you, Tanner, for your prep for this week. And when we return, we will have Vashawn Graham here on JSW as Caleb Yager. We'll sit down with him.
A full life, measured in seats, starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are the #1 killer of children 1 through 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly on WCTV. Today I have Vashawn Graham with me to do an interview. Thanks for coming in, Vashawn.
Hey, how you doing?
So, let's start out with a simple question. How's the season been for you as an individual?
Individually, I try to set my own goals. So, I mean, so far I am accomplishing a lot. So I think I'm doing pretty good, honestly. Plus, I get reviews from defensive coach V. So talking to him, I try to stay on track with that. So again, pretty good.
Okay. Backing up a little bit, how's your guys' season been as a team?
As a team, it's been stressful. Of course, we don't want the record that we have. But we are accomplishing a lot. I see a lot of it in practice, defensive-wise and offensive-wise. But again, we don't want to be here, but it's kind of something that we have to deal with.
I got you. As a senior, what have you learned that has helped you grow as an athlete here at Waynesburg?
Honestly, repeat it again?
So as a senior, you've kind of experienced probably growth as a player, and what have you learned that has helped you grow as an athlete? Maybe it's advice from coaches, maybe it's games that you've learned something at, or at here at Waynesburg.
Yeah, so it's mainly advice from coaches, and not even just coaches. It's previous athletes such as Blaze or Tristan from a few years ago. And I kind of just learned a lot from viewing how they played, and plus also applying that with some of the advice I got from my coaches. So from Coach Smithley to Coach Vienick, they tell me a lot about how I should play, and plus also watching film on how the previous guys in the past years, the 5-10 years ago. We've been watching film on that, and I get to see how they play and how the previous winning programs of Waynesburg used to practice, and I take a lot from that, and everything we do I take with pride. So yeah, I mean I learn a lot, and I try to learn as much as I can.
Okay, and you would say as an underclassman you learned from the seniors, and now you're in the senior position. Would you say that you are sharing advice and sharing wisdom with your younger teammates as well?
Definitely. There's a lot of things that were passed on from the previous years on to me that I'm also trying to apply to the incoming freshmen. Not even just the freshmen, the sophomores and juniors as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's a lot that that I'm trying to learn myself, and whatever I learn, I try to pass that on. That's how I was taught, so I can share whatever I learn, try to help others as well. But honestly, yeah, I mean, whatever I'm taught, I just want to pass on to my teammates. It's kind of I don't want to be selfish with the information I hold. So, I mean, the more I try to help out my teammates, then, I mean, the better we're going to be off.
And what would you say, what one piece of advice would you say that has helped you grow a lot? What would you say is the one thing that a coach has told you or a player has told you or showed you that has really helped you in your game?
Don't take anything for granted. Never take anything for granted. You do not know who's watching, whether you're practicing or rather you're in a game. Because if you take, let's say, I'll give you an example. If you take everything, so let's say you're practicing, and you know you're having a bad day, and you're letting it get it to your head. Like you have to go full force, like because the way how you practice is the way how you play in the game. And if you do bad in practice, then you're going to do bad in the game. And you don't know who's watching in the game, because you know maybe if you're good enough, maybe you have like some NFL scouts, or maybe you have some other people who might want to help you with your future, depending on like whatever your major is. Let's say if you're like you're in a comm department, you know, maybe somebody in the stands, you know, has connections that can probably help you with that. So, you know, getting your name out there is obviously a big deal. So again, I can never take anything for granted. And in practice, I go full force. In games, I go full force. I never let up on anything because, again, my mother taught me that, and plus a lot of other people, important figures in my life, taught me never to, you know, just give up because things are hard. No, you have to keep going.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying don't take anything for granted. You better give it all, even in practice when even nobody's watching. You gotta give it all in games because you don't know who's watching.
You do not know who's watching. Even the smallest details, film, go all out. Study as much as you can about the other team, not even just the other team, how you practice, watch how others practice, go all out, 110%.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that your mother has been a big influence in your life. Can you kind of describe to me how she has been that big influence in your life?
Honestly, my mother is the person who holds me down. She is honestly my light in the darkness. So whenever I have, from freshman year, not even just freshman year in high school, she's always been like that. She's been my support. She's been the one to tell me whenever I fall, I need to get back up because, again, you don't know who's watching. You don't know who's out there. Mm-hmm. You know, you got to keep going. I mean, mother, honestly, she's probably the biggest influence in my life. Out of everything that's been happening outside of football, you know, she's been pushing me and always looking at her, always keeping her in my mind. You know, exactly. That's my why. That's she's my why. She's my reason why I do everything.
Okay, awesome. So, obviously, being a student athlete, you got to balance school and you got to balance football as well. So, what would you say your major is?
Human services.
Human services. So, how has balancing football and school been? Has it been challenging? Has it helped you grow at all? What would you say has it impacted you?
Oh, it is tough. It's tough. Yeah. Honestly, I was actually talking to my grandfather about this just yesterday. He basically told me that school and sports, not even just football, like anything, it's like a business. You got to treat it like a business. So, I mean, you have to find a way how to keep what you do for football and what you do for studying, keep up with it. You can't do more with football and then let your academics slip. That's not how it works, because in a real world, whenever you're working 2 jobs, you can't let one job slip and then let the other one go. It doesn't work like that. So, I mean, it's tough. Practicing for, however many hours, and trying to find time to study, it can be really challenging.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fashawn, again for coming in for the interview. When we come back, Riley and Hugh will have the top 5 athletes of the week on Jacket Sports Weekly.
All right, you ready for some baseball trivia?
Let's do it.
What year produced the most no-hit games in the big leagues?
7 no-hitters in 1990.
Wow, that's right. Now a question that's not trivial. How many children will witness bullying this year? The answer, 3 out of 4.
75%?
That's right. How many of them will say something?
Kids want to help, but don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov.
Now it's time for our top 5 Waynesburg athletes of the week. I'm going to go first, and then Hugh will go. My number 1 is Justin Flack. He had over 100 yards rushing, and it's his first 100-yard rushing game as a Waynesburg University Yellow Jacket, and I expect him to have a lot more over his career. He ended up finishing with 111 yards and 1 touchdown. My number 2, Alyssa Proper, 74 assists over the 5 losses they had. She averaged 14.8 assists over that span, and that's just a crazy amount of numbers for her. Number 3, Christina Galanka. She had 2 goals in the Waynesburg versus Bethany game, and she ended up forcing overtime. Number 4, Vashon Graham. 11 tackles and a forced fumble versus Carnegie Mellon, and then he had 15 tackles, an interception, and another forced fumble against Grove City. And then my number 5 is Aubrey Wingart. She didn't have the weekend she would have liked to, but she did an amazing job, and that'll warrant my top 5. Now up to you.
All right, so number 5, I have a soccer player, a women's soccer player, Autumn Blair. She stopped 16 of 18 shots over the past week. Number 4, Justin Flack. He rushed for over 100 yards, had a touchdown. He also made 2 special teams tackles. Number 3, Jack Coakley, PAC Rookie of the Week. Number 2, Aubrey Wingart. She was the PAC Runner of the Week. And then number 1, Vashon Graham, who Caleb just sat down with 26 tackles in the past 2 games, going along with an interception. So fantastic job out of Vashon Graham. That's going to do it for us, for Riley, myself, and the crew. Thanks for tuning in.